Welcome to Comment with me, George Galloway, here on Press TV, still the voice of the voiceless. Comment is the big conversation, the great debate, but it can only be a debate if you join in. That's why I need above all your telephone calls on 44208-601-4555. Let me say that again, 44208-601-4555. You call us, we'll call you back, establish a clear line, and remember, if you get on the TV with me, then your TV has to be down at 0 on the volume switch, or I'll have to move swiftly on because no one will understand either of us. Or you can SMS me on 447800008066, or you can email me at comment@presstv.co.uk. And now you can Twitter us directly at comment_presstv. Tonight we're talking about the Ukraine. After the talks, which closed with 2 consecutive press conferences, first by the magnificent Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, who stands head and shoulders above all these diplomats in these talks and negotiations that go on around the world, and then by someone called John Kerry, best described as so wooden the birds were trying to nest in him. John Kerry's comments I want to deal with first, because something remarkable has happened. John Kerry has suddenly heard that the so-called government in Kiev, which was elected by no one and came to power by force, overthrowing the democratically elected government, is stuffed full of racist anti-Semites. He has been remarkably deaf to this self-evident truth all of these weeks and months, even though here on this program and many other people around the world have all been telling him that the fascist, ultra-nationalist formations in power in Ukraine have a long, bloody history of anti-Semitic racism against Jews and racism against Russians. And don't forget that 47% of the population of the Ukraine is Russian, either ethnically Russian or Russian-speaking. That's a very large percentage. Now, what do I mean by anti-Semitism? We're not talking here about some young Muslim behind a computer in his mother's garret, his mother's attic, typing away on Facebook. We're not even talking about some few hundred thugs running around at football matches in the English Defence League. We're talking about people with an ocean of Jewish blood on their hands. Let's take Svoboda, for example, and they are not the most extreme example. Their leader was responsible for mass murder of Jews within the lifetime of some people still alive today. When they heard that the Nazis were coming, they fell upon the Jews in their midst like wolves and slaughtered them. They didn't even wait for the SS to arrive. They slaughtered them themselves with their bare hands, with knives, just like the knives that John Kerry and William Hague provide for equally fanatic extremists in Syria and in Iraq. Svoboda worship their founder. They carry his picture around with them. He's on their logo. He's on their banner. Even though he is, by any definition, a Nazi, a fascist. And they hold 5 posts, 5, in the government in Kiev, including that of Deputy Prime Minister, Deputy Defense Minister, Deputy Minister of Intelligence and Security, and so on. The right sector, who are much newer, post-Second World War, are even more extreme. Goose-stepping, Hitler-saluting, absolute fascist maniacs who John Kerry has just discovered are responsible for this week's notice given to Jews in Western Ukraine that they must identify themselves when out in public, presumably with some kind of yellow star on their lapels, just like the ones that Hitler used to make the Jews wear in occupied Europe. Now, you couldn't make this up. This is the government that is receiving billions of dollars from the United States and the European Union, which is utterly bankrupt, which has country after country within its own borders, boundaries, in the direst economic emergency. Spain, where 50% of the people are unemployed. Greece, where the great capital of Athens is on fire regularly, with people who are hungry and jobless and who are being screwed into the ground by the very same European Union that is giving money, succor and comfort to an unelected, illegal coup government in Kiev. Suddenly, today, in Geneva, John Kerry began to see the light, because the story of this threat to the remaining Jews in Western Ukraine suddenly went global. Suddenly, John Kerry is very concerned about extremism in Western Ukraine. There can be no more of it. No more anti-Semitism, he says. There can be no more threats against Russian Orthodox Christians. There has to be autonomy in Eastern Ukraine, where most of the Russian people live. They have to be able to live their own lives, free of prejudice and bigotry. All the things that we have been saying since the coup took place. Isn't it remarkable how some people, not even on the road to Damascus, can experience such an extraordinary conversion? So what has been agreed today in Geneva? First of all, these fascist murder gangs must be disarmed by the coup authorities in Kiev. There can be no private armies in Ukraine, and that preeminently means that Svoboda and the right sector must give up their illegal weapons and disband their fascist militias. The buildings that are being occupied in eastern Ukraine must be returned to their owners. Their owners are the local authorities in eastern Ukraine. Those local authorities must be given autonomy in a new, rewritten constitution. I don't know about you, but I think this is all a bit of a triumph. Don't you? Don't you think that President Putin and Foreign Minister Lavrov have run rings around the rabid fascists in Kiev and their backers in Brussels and in Washington? I know what the ultimate objective of the West in Ukraine was, probably still is, which is to move the tanks of NATO ever closer to the borders of the Russian Federation. But it hasn't worked out that way, at least on the basis of the agreement that was made today. But if the agreement is not kept, if violence continues to be threatened and used by the coup authorities in Kiev, then President Putin made it clear in his 4-hour telephone marathon with the people of Russia today. My goodness, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could get 4 hours of our leaders on the telephone, televised live to the entire country. In his 4-hour telephone marathon today, President Putin was very clear. He has a right and a duty to defend the Russian people in eastern Ukraine. He hopes that he will not have to exercise that right, fulfill that duty. So the onus now is on the coup authorities in Kiev, stuffed with fascists and Nazis as they are, to live up to the words spoken by that plank of wood, John Kerry, in Geneva today. Let me hear your point of view. Walters is first up. He's in Norway, and he's most welcome. Walters, welcome to the show.
Yes, Thank you, George. I will begin by saying that those who were protesting in Maidan should know that they were paid to destabilize their own country. And I think that they should begin to see what is coming out from what they were doing. And I see, in addition to what you have said, I see three reasons why they should, I say, the West is punishing Russia. The first is to push NATO to the doorstep of Russia. The second is to punish Russia over Syria. And the third reason is something that seems to have died down, but not. The asylum that Russia offered to Snowden is still bubbling in Washington, and they're trying to do everything possible to punish Russia in that. In order to stop the crisis in Ukraine, which I think if we're not careful, Ukraine will become Egypt, is for the West and the coup-appointed leadership in Kiev to reinstate democracy an elected government that was in Kiev before the coup. If not, it is going to be like Egypt, as I say. And it's very, very fury when you hear Obama trying to refuse in Brussels that the West or Washington knew nothing about all what was going on in Kiev, despite Newland's leaked conversation. So I think we have to be very careful with what these politicians say and what they do. Let me just end, George, by bringing in a very difficult and sometimes a strange example. Democracy to them is a government that agrees to them. If it doesn't, they don't see it as democracy. I come from a country where a dictatorship has been in power for 32 years.
Where is that, Walters?
By this guy.
Which country?
In Cameroon.
Okay.
Cameroon.
Yeah.
They support it because the government of Cameroon is giving everything, is giving the oil, is giving the forest. Tomorrow, Cameroon. Yes, so tomorrow or one Monday morning, they will get up and tell us that they want to institute democracy in Cameroon, as if they realized yesterday, Sunday, that a dictator has been sitting there for 32 years.
Well, you're right about that, Walters. A quite magnificent call to start off the show. Tremendous perspicacity from Norway via Cameroon. I very much agree with almost everything that you said, except this. There can never be, there will never be the return of the Yanukovych government to Kiev. I think it was a very bad government. I think that Yanukovych was a very bad president. But hey, there are bad governments and bad presidents all over the world. That doesn't mean you can set fire to police officers, set fire to the presidency, threaten to murder the MPs until they change the constitution and agree to outlaw the language spoken by 47% of the people, because that's exactly what happened. What we need now is effectively a federation in Ukraine, where the people of eastern Ukraine can be governed by people that they want to be governed by, and have relations, normal relations, with their compatriots, their co-religionists across the Russian border in the Russian Federation, and act as a bulwark against NATO expansion. Because this is, as you said, exactly what lies at the heart of all this. The NATO generals and their political masters are trying to encircle Russia with NATO military power, as indeed they are currently trying to do with China and have already begun to do with Iran. Well, no one can accept to be ever more tightly surrounded by armed, including nuclear arms as a backup, military alliances which are inimical to themselves, hostile to themselves. No one will accept it. John Kennedy took the world almost to war, world thermonuclear war, which would have ended life on the planet, over the presence of Soviet missiles in Cuba, 90 miles away from the coast in Florida. And they think they have the right to act in such a way, but that Russia does not have that right. And they've got another think coming. Doreen is in Canada. Always worth hearing. Doreen, go ahead.
Oh, hi, George, and thank you for a wonderful introduction comment.
Thank you.
It enlightened me quite a bit.
Thank you.
Because just this week we had insane McCain is at it again. If he's not wanting to bomb Iran, now he wants to give weapons to the oppressed Ukrainians.
Yeah.
He should give some thought to giving the oppressed Palestinians some weapons. They need all the help they can get.
You bet.
How come NATO doesn't help these people, George?
Well, Doreen, he's the best friend of Israel in the U.S. Congress, but he's also the best friend of the fascist anti-Semites in Ukraine. Go figure.
Yeah, and there's a great interview on YouTube by Bob Carr, the former minister of Australia, on how he says the pro-Israel lobby has controlled their government. And he just, if people wanted to go, it's a great interview with him. And I think we have the same problem here in Canada, because Harper right now is putting a bill forward, Bill C-13, in Parliament for any Canadian speaking about or support for the treatment of the Palestinians will be treated as an anti-Semite, carrying a 2-year sentence. Now, if that's not
it's an affront to the English language, apart from anything else. It's an offense.
Yeah.
It's an offense against our language to describe solidarity with the Palestinian people as being anti-Semitic, quite apart from the fact that the Palestinians are themselves Semitic, and it cannot possibly be anti-Semitic to be in solidarity with Semites, with Semitic people. But anyway, it is part and parcel of a process which you and I both have watched in horror, whereby Canada, once one of the most loved countries in the world, the kinder, gentler America, has placed itself willingly, voluntarily, or at least its government has placed it willingly and voluntarily in the front ranks of the hated on the earth. Canada has been reduced by the Harper government to no more, no less, but no more than Israel's embassy to the world. And I, for the life of me, cannot understand why the Canadian people do not rise up and stop this. Because actually, Harper's making Canada not just an object of hatred in the world, but an object of derision, of risibility. People are laughing at the Zionist extremism of the Canadian government. Doreen, thanks for the call. In Canada, Mansour is on the line now. He is in Nottingham, in England. Mansour, welcome to the show.
Good evening, George.
Good evening to you. Go ahead.
Basically, what I think about the whole Ukraine-Russia situation is, right, what they're trying to do, this NATO, and this is my opinion, what NATO is, it's the military front of Zionism, NATO, yeah? What they're trying to do, they're trying to corner Russia into a little hole. But Russia ain't the countries that they try to corner normally, if you know what I mean. They will not back down, and Russia has every right to protect its interest. Why do they have a right to protect their interests and Russia can't have a right to protect theirs, George? Why?
Mansour, especially when their interests are tens of thousands of miles away, and Ukraine is next door to Russia.
I'd love it if Russia sent one of their military ships to the Gulf, I don't know, Mexico, near America somewhere. I'd love to see the reaction, mate.
Yes. Do you remember that priceless occasion when Donald Rumsfeld said on television, "It's not our fault that God put America's oil under other people's countries"? He actually said that. Now, I mean, it's funny. It's funny, but it speaks volumes that these are Russian people in the next door country to Russia, but Russia has no right to defend them from oppression. Whilst people in Bahrain tens of thousands of miles from the United States, have to suffer a dictatorship kept in power, not least by the American Fifth Fleet, which is harbored there in the harbor in Bahrain. Brilliant call, Mansour. Thanks for that. Samuel is in Paris. Let's hear from him. Samuel, welcome. Samuel, turn the volume down on your television.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, but you need to put the volume down on your TV.
Yeah, the volume is down already.
Okay, Samuel, go ahead.
My comment today on Russia, America versus Europe is that from my own point of view, America is trying to pay back at Russia because of the Edward Snowden issue. Because exactly what Russia is doing, America is doing all around the world in other areas that nobody can talk. Now we can see the issue of Palestine and Israel. If actually Russia have broken international law by forcibly occupying Crimea, why can America condemn Russia, Israel, for occupying the Palestinian land? That's also against international law. And there are thousands of people been dying in that area because of Israeli bombardment. And America, Obama cannot say anything concerning those things. But Obama wants to pay back at Russia because Russia gave Edward Snowden an asylum. Because what Edward Snowden exposed America dirty deeds. America do the same things around the world, and nobody talked to them. So
well, they actually even said.
I just want to warn Obama that this is not the right for her to do those things, because America has done it in the past, and nobody has said anything to them.
Samuel, they actually said, British and American statespeople have actually said, you cannot just go around taking chunks of other people's countries. When both Britain and America are the biggest supporters with money and weapons and political and diplomatic and media support for the Zionist entity that they call Israel. And while I'm on that subject, I have been now attacked for at least 2 weeks in the right-wing Israeli press for saying on here that Israel is perfectly happy to see these anti-Semitic outrages occurring in Ukraine because the entity describing itself as the Jewish state has as its central objective that all Jews all over the world must leave their own countries and go and live in somebody else's country called Palestine. That is their central objective. Aliyah, they call it. The homecoming. Well, if that's so, why would Israel object to the presence of Nazis and fascists threatening Jews in Kiev? They must welcome it because it's likely to lead to the remaining Ukrainian Jews heading for Palestine. That's why, and listen up, Mr. Israeli media, that's why in the Haaretz newspaper, Israeli military officers, not me, Israeli military officers boasted of their role in the Maidan in Kiev alongside, shoulder to shoulder with the Nazis and the fascists in Western Ukraine, boasted of their role in the Maidan in the overthrow of the elected president and government in Ukraine. So I don't know why the Israeli press attacked me on this. I got that story from their own newspaper, Haaretz. The officers were named in the Haaretz. Israel and the United States and Britain are deeply involved in the destabilization of Ukraine. But now they've realized that it may actually be yet another Frankenstein monster that they have created. In the second half, which is coming up after just 3 minutes of a short news bulletin, I'm going to tell you about a woman called Catherine Ashton. Nobody knows her, but she's very important. I'll be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back to Comment with me, George Galloway, here on Press TV, still and always the voice of the voiceless. It was today in Geneva another stunning reversal for the foreign policy objectives of what they call the West. That plank of wood, John Kerry, who's not so much running as slipping towards the primaries to try and be the Democratic Party's next candidate for president, so wooden the birds are trying to nest in him, was forced humiliatingly to go to the rostrum and accept another diplomatic drubbing. There was no mention of Crimea. That's yesterday's news. Crimea is now part of Russia, and none of them can do or say anything about it. Anti-Semitism and extremism and racism and violence and the threats of violence from the coup supporters in Kiev had to be denounced by Kerry from the rostrum today. Just take stock. It's only yesterday, metaphorically speaking, that the United States was threatening Iran, threatening Syria, threatening Russia, and how different it all looks today. It is a turning point in international affairs in which this supreme diplomat, Lavrov, was able to administer the coup de grace to Western power. There is no more unipolar world. This world has become the multipolar world that it needs to be. And the writ of the United States runs ever more shortly. So we're talking about the Ukraine, the debacle, the paradox, John McCain, Israel's best friend, breakfasting, lunching and dining with Nazis in the Ukraine, people who actually, not metaphorically, actually massacred Jews during the Holocaust, even before the Nazi SS forces got there. Israel sending its agents to the Maidan in Kiev to help overthrow the elected government there, shoulder to shoulder with these Nazis and fascists, whilst crying havoc and unleashing the dogs of war if a single Muslim behind a computer in his bedroom makes a mistake of nomenclature on Facebook. These hypocrites stand today utterly exposed. But I want to throw something else into the mix. There was an unidentified, unidentifiable woman involved in these talks today. Her name is Mrs. Ashton, Catherine Ashton. Virtually none of you have ever heard of her. Certainly none of you have ever voted for her. She's never even been a parish councillor. She was a local government official, paid professional official of a provincial English local municipality, but now she's there at the talks as Europe's foreign minister. She's not my foreign minister. I'm a European. I'm a citizen of the European Union. She doesn't speak for me. Who chose her as our foreign minister, going around the world threatening people with non-existent military force? Catherine Ashton and her elevation to first the House of Lords by Tony Blair and then to be the foreign minister of the European Union is a democratic outrage. If the European Union must have a foreign minister, why can't we choose that foreign minister? Why can't even the European Parliament choose that foreign minister? She's chosen by an unelected, secretive group of people, caucus, a little clique, which doesn't even publish its accounts, or at least cannot justify its accounts, which have never once been audited, once in the entire history of the European Union. It is an outrage that Europeans like me and Niall in Dublin are being misrepresented by a foreign minister in the likes of Geneva today. Niall, what do you say to that?
Yes, George, good evening to you, and happy Easter to you.
And to you. Thank you very much for remembering.
Okay, George, I think when you look at it, the one thing that strikes me is the hypocrisy from the West in relation to the Ukrainian debacle. The first one is in relation to Israel and how the Israeli agents were involved in the Maidan. And that it's not the first time that Israel has been helping fascists. They've done it. They're doing it in Syria. And, there about 6 months ago when a Jewish shrine was destroyed in Aleppo, there was no condemnation from Israel, and the only condemnation in the entire Middle East came from Iran, of all countries.
Well, Jews have an honoured place in Iran, of course, Niall, as you know.
Absolutely, George, absolutely. And, the very, very contradictory nature of the statements coming from the EU. I would like to point out Mr. Carl Bildt's statement, he's the foreign minister of Sweden. And there about 2 months ago, when the democratically elected government of Ukraine, when they were facing armed Nazis in the streets of the Maidan, Bildt called on President Yanukovych not to use force on the Nazis. Whereas there 2 days ago, when the unelected Cable in Kiev, when they moved their tanks and their planes against protesters in the eastern Ukraine, Carl Bildt condemned the protesters. And he was supporting the putsch in Kiev in using force against Russians, ethnic Russians and Jews in eastern Ukraine who genuinely were fearful of an unelected, unrepresentative Cable in Kiev, which was made up by Nazis and neo-fascists.
It's unbelievable. As you put it so succinctly, Niall, it is, you couldn't make this story up. Bildt, who is an American agent rather than the foreign minister of Sweden, which is why he's driven the policy towards Julian Assange holed up in London in the Ecuador embassy. Bildt is a perfect example of this utter hypocrisy and double standards. Now, let's be frank. The people in eastern Ukraine have no obligation whatsoever towards the coup government in Kiev. There is no obligation of any kind, neither moral nor legal, nor political, nor economic, nor social. No obligation of any kind on the people of eastern Ukraine to accept the writ of a government which came to power by overthrowing the elected government. When that act took place, Ukraine effectively ceased to be an independent country. It ripped up its constitution and it lost all claim to the loyalty and obedience of any and all citizens inside any part of the Ukraine. And now they have lost Crimea, and today they effectively lost eastern Ukraine. We'll see what happens with the new constitution, the autonomy that is going to be enjoyed in the east, and so on. Niall, as always, brilliant from Dublin. John is on the line in France. John, welcome.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead, sir. You're on the air.
Well, Ukraine. I was just wondering what it'd be like if Massachusetts all of a sudden decided they wanted to go in with Russia. I wonder what the attitude of America would be, especially when they've chased out the president, the elected president, and put their own people in.
Alaska might be a possibility one day, John.
Wherever.
You never know.
Wherever. But the point
you know
is
that Ukraine, the eastern Ukraine, was part of Russia until Lenin gave it away for some inexplicable reason in 1920.
Of Russia, the Socialist Republics of Russia, the whole of Ukraine. and of course Crimea. That was given away in 1956
by Khrushchev. Yes, Crimea was given away in 1956 by Khrushchev. But the point I'm making is that prior to Lenin giving it away in 1920, all of the eastern Ukraine was part of Russia. It was called Novorussia.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I didn't know that. Yeah.
Go ahead.
But the point is that it's an absolute nonsense, because all you have to do is to look at your own program and see that I can't get you in the Free West because they've stopped you. I can't get your television program in the Free West. So does one need to know any more, really, about the nonsense that they give you about freedom?
Well, John, I couldn't put that better myself. What do you think they hoped to achieve in Ukraine, and how close do you think they got to what they hoped?
Well, they won't be satisfied until there's a bloody war, and then they start earning money again with the munitions and Christ knows what.
I'll tell you what, John, you don't want a war with Russia.
Exactly. 27 million Russians died in the last war. I don't know whether it was it was under 500,000 English, under 500,000 Americans, and 27 million Russians. And they want war? I don't think so.
John, brilliantly put. And I was just saying before the show, John, on the very point that you raised as a parenthesis, all this talk of freedom of speech and freedom of expression, and we're lecturing the world about the lack of it and how governments must allow it, whilst you in France are watching me on a computer. Aidan in the United Kingdom, who's up next, is watching me on a computer, because the British government, as revealed in Julian Assange's WikiLeaks many months before it happened, was determined to take us off the television. But guess what, John? It hasn't worked. That's why you're still here, and Aidan is still here in the United Kingdom. Aidan, welcome. Aidan, are you there?
Hi, George.
Welcome, sir. Go ahead.
Hi, thanks. Thanks for having me back on your show. George, I think the West's ultimate objective is to force Europe into making new contingency plans with regards to its current energy policies. The two so-called settler states, the US and Israel, have decided that they are going to start selling gas to the EU themselves. So in the spirit of free market competition, they've decided to kick Russia out. The show that's going on now is a huge PR bluff by the US Zionist regime to scare Europe into no longer becoming reliant on Russian gas so they can pipe it in themselves. America has already pledged to start shipping in LNG by tankers, and soon the new gas discovery off the coast of Gaza will be piped via Turkey through its existing pipelines. I think this is the long-term plan of this Ukrainian game.
Well, I'm sure that's a factor, Aidan. I don't believe that it's the major factor. And British and European consumers better take stock of the fact that 50% of all the gas in Germany is from Russia. 35% of all the gas in Britain is from Russia. We've already destroyed all our coal mines, and our oil is running out. So being nice to Russia would probably be a better policy, certainly one that was more in the United Kingdom's own interest. Aidan, thanks as always. Got to go to Somalia next. Mohammed is on the line there. Mohammed, welcome. Mohammed, are you there?
Yeah, I'm still there. Yeah.
Go ahead. You're on the air, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah. Good evening, George.
Good evening.
Yes. I'm from a country called Somaliland. Everyone considers us a part of Somalia. So I want to talk about the situation in Ukraine.
Yeah.
And Americans' involvement.
Yeah, go on.
I think Russia has all the right to protect the Russian-speaking people in Crimea as they are origin of Russia. I mean, if they were American people, or I don't know, American people in countries like like Ukraine, I think America would have done the same. But I don't know why America is... I mean, at the first place, who gave America the ultimate responsibility to protect the world? If there is something happening, it's the first to, to punish whoever is involved, no matter looking all the edges of the issue. So it is because they have the very advanced techniques of military and technology. I don't know if that's some kind of dictatorship.
Well, look, it's a very good point that you make, Mohammed. The United States is on its knees economically. Its currency is kept afloat only by the People's Republic of China, continuing to hold it as a reserve currency. And in my view, the Chinese people deserve better than that. And the reality is that they're going around the world with Kerry and others, threatening people with a force which is purely military. And in the case of Russia, cannot possibly be used. As John in France was just saying, you cannot have a war with Russia, because then your country will cease to exist. Russia has just as much nuclear firepower as the United States has. And if the United States goes to war with Russia, Russia will go to war with the United States. And then the United States will cease to exist. So they can't go to war with Russia, and therefore it's all just noise coming out of Basso Profundo, Mr. John Kerry. Thanks for the call. Mehdi is on the line in Iran. Mehdi, welcome. Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Go ahead, sir. You're on the air.
Hello, George.
Hello, sir. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Yes, go on.
Excuse me, George. You just said that America is threatening other countries like Russia and China and Iran. I'm fully agree with you that America is doing this on purpose, and they will not stop this kind of policy in the world. But I want to say that what Russia is doing is not anything other than threatening Ukraine. It's just something like America do. We will not accept it. We don't think that it's good for the world. I think threatening is bad situation for all the for the world. Even America is doing that, or Russia is doing that. It's not good enough for the world. The world needs peace. The world needs living for together. It's not. We don't want any other threatening from another country.
Who is Russia threatening?
Together peacefully.
Mehdi, who is Russia threatening?
Ukraine.
Do you mean the illegal coup authorities in Ukraine? Is that what you mean? Are the 47% of Ukrainians who are Russian, are they not Ukrainians?
Yes, of course, they're Ukrainian.
So who is Russia threatening exactly?
The government of Ukraine.
Who is the government of Ukraine? Who elected the government of Ukraine?
I'm sorry, I want to add a comment to your... You earlier said that people in Canada should rise against their country because of the politics that this government is choosing against Iran, against other countries. I'm agree with you.
But you can't agree with me because you're misrepresenting me. I was not remotely suggesting that the people of Canada set fire to their parliament, to their government buildings, to their police officers, threatened to murder their MPs. That's not the kind of rise I was talking about, Mehdi. I was talking about a democratic, with votes on paper. That's the rise I was talking about. And that's not how the people in power in Kiev came to power. You're a very confused man. But at least you prove one thing. Iran is a place where there are many different points of view. Let me talk to V in Macedonia. I don't often talk to Macedonia. V, welcome.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead. Now, you must turn your volume down, or I'll have to move on.
I already did. Hello, George.
Yes, hello, sir. Go ahead.
I would like to congratulate to your emission. It's very rarely seen here. I'm seeing you through satellite.
Oh, wonderful. I'm very happy to hear that.
And obviously they want to make some blockade on your emissions, right? Well, do you can trust to all parties agreed today in Geneva?
Yeah.
I would not believe them very much, especially the parties from the West, you know. And my wife is suffering from cancer thanks to American democracy bombing in Kosovo. All practitioners told me it's the case unofficially because, you know, we are now Democrats here and we can't speak officially very clear facts.
Well, look, V,
is very healthy, you
brother,
know.
you're going to have to call me back next week so we can have a longer conversation, because I've only got room for 1 minute from somebody called Blair in the United Kingdom, and I need to know whether it's that Blair. Blair, welcome.
Yes. Welcome. How are you?
Oh, I'm very well. Go ahead, quickly.
All right. George, good evening to you.
Good
what
evening.
I'd like to say is that I'm sitting here looking at a booklet, and the booklet is a 1917, and it's called Russia Free, and it's 10 speeches delivered at the Royal Albert Hall in London, which welcome the Russian Revolution, where 10,000 people were packed into it.
Wow.
And I'd just like to actually read to you very quickly.
No, you can't, Blair, because I've only got 20 seconds left. But it's very good to hear from you and about that booklet. And I hope that you and I will be sharing a platform in Bootle very soon, because we're determined that there's only one Blair that's going to be in Bootle, and that's you, and not the son of the war criminal, Tony Blair, who they hope to parachute into a safe seat in Parliament. God willing, I'll see you next week.
Hello, just comment your name and the place you left that number. And just make sure that your television volume is set to 0. So 0. Can you spell your name for me? Yeah, I know. You redirectly put through this phone number and then we'll call you back.